This is Philosophy Bites with me, David Edmonds.
And me, Nigel Warburton.
Philosophy Bites is available at www.philosophybites.com.
Over 2,000 years ago, the somewhat neglected Chinese philosopher Songzi wrote about insults and the sense of shame. Do his insights have any resonance today? Jing Hu, a philosopher at Concordia University, Montreal, thinks they do.
Jing Hu, welcome to Philosophy Bites.
Hello.
The topic we're talking about today is insults and shame, and in particular how these have been analysed by the Chinese philosopher Songzi. Before we get into what Songzi says about shame and insults, perhaps you can tell us just a little bit about him.
Yes, of course. So Songzi was this very prominent thinker during the Warring State China. He was active roughly around 307 BCE to 291 BCE. And he's written a lot of work, but none survived. So he's one of those philosophers with a very unlucky fate. But he was traveling from places to places, trying to talk to all kinds of rulers, kings, sheikhs, to persuade them to stop fighting, stop having wars against each other.
And you talk about the warring period, so who's fighting who?
Everybody against everybody, basically. Back then, there isn't concept of China. It's just a bunch of different states. And they're constantly having wars against each other because all of them believe that they have the mandate, that they have the right to rule the whole kingdom. Eventually, the first empire of Qing kind of like eliminated all the other states and then unified the kingdom. So that's how everything ended. But basically, all the philosophers back then, they were concerned with why we have so many conflicts, wars, killings, and tragedies. How are we going to see a way out of this?
As a matter of interest, what kind of status do these Chinese philosophers have? Are they fated in the community? How do they make a living?
That's such a good question. So to start off, there was this one official palace. It's called Jixia Academy. The king of Qi, so Qi is one very strong and wealthy state at the time. In order to show that they really listen to philosophers, really listen to well-respected thinkers, the king decided to start an academy to host all the scholars so that they could have lively debates, political debate or philosophical debate, or whatever they like. And then they would be treated with honor, with respect, and then, also with financial support. And also from time to time, because the rulers, on one hand, they do want military dominance over other states. But on the other hand, they also want a good name, want good reputation, because that's also part of the game. So sometimes they would invite well-respected thinkers to their state to have like a talk, to have a hearing with the king, to show that they do listen, even though a lot of the text would show us that such hearings rarely go really well.
So let's get back to insults. Songzi is writing about them over 2 millennia ago. What kind of insults are we talking about? Are they insults that we would recognise as insults today?
I think some of them, yes. A very, very common one were insults against, your family honor, right? Your ancestry, your dignity. So those are the kind of insults he is primarily focusing on. And then a lot of times the countries or the states, they would launch wars against each other because the ruler felt insulted, felt provoked, felt slighted by the other states. And they used that as a legitimate reason to start a war. And then Songzi is not very happy about it.
And those personal insults, can you be a bit more specific about what counts as an insult?
I think it would be something such as someone buried their parents or ancestors after they passed away in a very exaggerated manner, and was being accused of being dishonest about their family history or family legacy. Maybe their family were a family of farmers, but they claimed their family were a family of scholars, which is a very huge violation of rituals. And if someone was accused of such a matter, that would be considered a very serious insult.
Right. So Songzi is not writing in a vacuum, is he? He's writing about insults and shame in the context of other classical Chinese texts. Who are his philosophical contemporaries?
Hmm. So his philosophical contemporary include a number of Confucian philosophers, Mengzi, Mencius, and Xunzi. So Mencius had a text that recorded one of Songzi's journey. Basically, Mencius said, "Oh, one time I ran into the honorable Songzi, and he was on a journey. So I asked, 'Where are you going?' So Songzi said, 'Oh, I'm traveling to the state of Qing because I heard there's impending battle between the state of Qing and Chu. So I'm going to persuade the ruler of Qing to stop this battle.'" So Mencius said, "Okay, what if you fail? Because those kind of persuasion by philosophers frequently do fail." And the Songzi basically said, "It's very simple. I'll just turn around and then, travel to Chu and then try to persuade the ruler of Chu. It only takes one to stop fighting a war." And then other than that, Mencius and Xunzi and Zhuangzi, all the classic Chinese philosophers basically refers back to Songzi at some point. So they're all like active thinkers during that time.
So I want to hear what their positions were with regard to shame, but perhaps you can tell us how shame was regarded as an emotion during this period.
Yeah, very, very briefly, because I would have to tell you I have papers and then proposed a book on this topic. So I probably wouldn't be able to say everything there is. But for the Confucians, starting from Confucius himself, he focused on the idea of 吃 a lot. And then 吃, it's kind of like an internal sense of shame. Like when I have 吃, I know what to do, and more importantly, what not to do, like what is beneath me, something I would never do. But this is a very internal sense of shame. Later on, at the point of Mencius and Songzi, we will see people starting to focus more on interpersonal relationship, such as insult and humiliation. When I have a very good sense of shame, I know exactly what I want to do and what I don't want to do. But some other people might bring shame to me, right? They may humiliate me, or I may be affiliated with people who are regarded as shameful by marriage or by other social relationship. What should I do then? Does my internal sense of shame protect me from this kind of social aspect of shame? So there's the lively discussion that Songzi and Xunzi talks about, mostly focus on the second part of shame.
The second part being how we should respond to attitudes towards us by others.
Yes, the interpersonal aspect of shame, which is the theoretically more interesting and richer part of the theory, because it's very easy to say, well, we have to have an internal sense of shame that's autonomous, that tell us what to do. But it's more difficult to come up with a theory that adequately addresses both how we self-regard ourselves, but also how we respond and then react to other people when treated in demeaning ways or being placed in compromising situations.
And where does Sun Tzu say that the other Confucian philosophers have gone wrong in their analysis of shame?
So it starts from a very practical difference. I think the Confucians would say if you insulted my family name and my honor, then it is well within my right to fight you, to use my aggression to show you that you cannot insult my ancestor or my family name. You do have to defend your social name. But Songzi thinks that, well, there's so many fights going on between individuals and between states. Why can't we free ourselves from such constraints? Just to think, oh, just because you insult me does not mean I have to behave in such a predictable way. Doesn't that also mean that I'm so manipulative? I listen to exactly what you insult me of. So he does want to say that, well, there is a distinction between internal and external, and then we are free to not care about what other people say about us. And if we don't care, if we have weaker emotion, less response, then we don't have to fight them and we don't have to defend our honor or our shame because it does not really matter. I think a very good example would be someone insulted another of their family name. Because for the Confucians, obviously the good name of their mother, the good name of their father, those are extremely important because our social identity is part of what we need to manage as social beings. But Songzi, when he was described by another Taoist philosopher, Zhuangzi, it was said that Songzi does not care a bit about what other people say of him. The whole world can be praising him and it does not motivate him to do anything more. Or the whole world could be criticizing him. It does not discourage him from doing what he thinks is the worthy thing, which is persuading kings to stop fighting. So I think in those cases, a very clear example would be when one is insulted, they would want to have a private fight to defend themselves or their family names. And Songzi would say, no, you don't have to. And then the way you can achieve not reacting that way is by limiting your emotions. If we just have less emotion and a weaker emotion, then maybe we would just let it go instead of assigning any moral significance to such insults and provocation.
And is the point that if an insult is unjustified, it's entirely legitimate to ignore it?
I think for Songzi, he actually does not necessarily care if the insult is justified or not. Insults and praises, actually, it comes in a pair, right? So, however others insult us or praise us, it just doesn't matter because it does not enter what he considered to be the core of who he is. So, this is a critical difference between him and then some of the Confucians because the Confucians would definitely think about whether the insults are valid or not. They would definitely think, oh, is this just some crazy people saying crazy things? Or does the insult actually have any merits? And if it does have merits, maybe we would need to think about it and then change how we behave. That's also how Songzi was later criticized. It seems that he is cutting off this connection between the external world and the internal moral domain of ours.
Isn't it the case, though, that we have to care about how others perceive us? Because if others think we've behaved shamefully, that's going to affect how they treat us. That's going to affect our lives.
Yeah, I think he is just reacting to the violence and the fights and the conflicts he was witnessing in his time, not only between states and states. Another issue that he was really trying to address was private fights because people were fighting and killing each other over very small conflicts, a verbal insult, right? I think he was really moved by that. But I think he was criticized for the Confucians, exactly like what you were saying. They think it's very important that we do connect ourselves to the external world, to the external feedback we can receive from our community members. Some of them might be ridiculous, but a lot of them might be reasons for us to reflect on our own behavior and our moral cultivation.
What function, if any, then does he think that shame serves?
That's a very good question. Like a lot of people ask me, how does he compare to, for example, a Stoic? So he has a very clear political focus. That's one of the difference, right? On that side, he's no different from a Confucian. They are very active in politics, trying to engage themselves and then also his followers. He has a very big group of followers. And then he's trying to include them in their political activities, trying to persuade rulers, persuade kings, persuade the public how important it is to have peace instead of aggression, conflicts. I think he does not think shame has a very important function in our morality.
We live in a society which, it seems to me, is saturated by shame. People are shamed on social media the whole time. Are there any lessons from Songzi's philosophy that can be applied to the 21st century?
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned how social media can play a role nowadays, not only in shame and online shaming, but also a very clear example is rage baiting. So anger, shame, aggression, they were kind of in the same camp. And I'm sure Sun Tzu would say that don't have strong anger response. If we just care a little bit less about views, maybe then we would be freer. Just because someone provoke me, slight me, or saying something outrageous does not necessarily mean that we have to respond. And if we can make that distinction that something is external and something is internal, it kind of helps us to be freer. it's a helpful mechanism for us to filter out some of the information that we do not necessarily have to engage personally, so that we could have a clearer moral inner space.
The flip side of that is that one might feel that if somebody is insulting us, maybe even being discriminatory or racist, we shouldn't be relaxed about it. We shouldn't just dismiss it and let it go. We should respond to it.
Yes, I definitely agree. So I think this is where the Confucians, they are probably more relevant here. The Confucians were saying that you should definitely fight, right? When someone insults your name, insults your family, and in today's case, I think a more relevant example would be someone saying racist slurs or, being prejudiced against a group of people. So in those cases, Confucians would definitely say you need to fight. A good name does matter. How a group were perceived in the community, they do matter. For them, especially Xunzi, who acknowledged that anybody being placed in a compromising situation, they would feel shame. So Xunzi does recognize, this is a Confucian philosopher, does recognize there's a direct connection between our internal emotional state and how we are treated. This view is also important to keep in mind because it does not shift the burden to the people on the receiving ends of insults or discrimination and so on and so forth. It does say that, well, if those people are feeling bad about themselves, it's because something's wrong with the society and something's wrong with how they are being treated, and we need to look into it and correct that. So I do think the Confucians are especially helpful in this regard as well.
But that's not Sun Chi's approach, because he's telling us to lower the emotional temperature. He's advising us to reduce our emotional response.
Yes, that's correct. Songzi would say, no, just disregard. Just disregard it, which I think sometimes is also a helpful strategy, even for individuals suffering from racism, sexism. Sometimes it can be a useful strategy when they do not think they stand a very good chance of fighting, or sometimes they simply do not have the energy and the mental strength to fight every single battle, right? So I think it's nothing wrong with taking a Songzi approach once in a while.
Well, we'll see if it catches on. Jing Hu, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you so much.
You've been listening to Philosophy Bites. This episode was made in association with the Institute of Philosophy and supported by the Ideas Workshop, part of Open Society Foundations. For more Philosophy Bites, go to philosophybites.com.